Hi, this session we're talking about anxiety, depression and well-being. And I've always struggled with periods of low mood and having no motivation. Although I'm not clinically depressed, I have spoken to my GP on a number of occasions and did get referred for mental health support, and it certainly helped a lot to talk through some of my feelings with somebody who understood without judgment. I was also fortunate to receive specialist disability counselling a few years ago, and this was really important in helping me identify where my issues of anxiety, control, and dealing with conflict originated. Unfortunately, this support came to me rather late in life, because living with a complex, life-limiting condition does affect you emotionally, and talking with someone about your feelings will benefit you and will help you avoid I would say it's really important to talk with someone about your feelings, because it will benefit you, and it will help you avoid some of the issues that have negatively affected my well-being in adult life. And I would just end by saying it is okay to talk about how you feel, and I would urge you to get support where you can. Thank you. I'm next going to hand over to Ryan, who was going to speak first. Okay, Ryan.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay? Yep. Okay, so hello everyone, I'm Ryan Worth, I'm 23, I'm going to be sharing my experiences of anxiety, depression and well-being. Yeah, if you go to the next slide. So these are the challenges of living with Duchenne and how they affect my mental health. The first one is lack of independence. I felt like I was restricted because the care I received was very limited. My brother also has Duchenne, and social services were treating us as the same person. We were sharing one carer between us both, so we could not be independent. Anything we had to do together. We almost felt like we were prisoners. College also affected my mental health, because when I was entering college from my high school, I was told that there was an issue with my personal care, and they would not be able to help me with that. I would have to employ an external agency to assist me. I was clearly unhappy with this, and although I disagreed, I did not want to ruin all my ambitions, so I persevered in the hope that it would get better. The coordinator of the college said to me that she would assist me if it was an emergency, unofficially, but she would have been disciplined for this. It never worked like this. When I needed assistance, there was no way of getting in touch, as she was a lecturer as well. I had to employ an agency that would only come in for 3 set times a day. If I did not go to the toilet in these set times, there was nobody to assist me. The complete lack of support I thought was just wrong. I was desperate for the toilet multiple times, and it was very close. Eventually, it obviously affected my mental health so much that I just quit college. The feeling was that I would never get the support just because of my disability. Hospital treatment also affected my mental health, as in 2012 I was admitted to Leighton Hospital in Crewe with pneumonia. I had no use of the calling system for the nurses because of my muscle weakness. I was using a CPAP with a full face mask because I couldn't breathe properly because of the fluid on my lungs. Therefore, bear in mind, there was no calling system and I could barely speak. I wasn't allocated one-to-one nursing, and as you all know, hospitals have a shortage of staff, so it wasn't necessarily their fault. Therefore, I was under observations and I had to try and shout when I needed help. I was also on IV antibiotics. It gave me the side effect of diarrhea, so I was desperate and no one was coming, so I couldn't do anything but have an accident. This happened twice. Obviously, this really affected my mental health because I am not incontinent. They recommended that I had to wear continence pads, so I did because the lack of staff. This was completely stripping me of my dignity. I am not incontinent, they were incompetent. I was being weaned off my CPAP machine. I was having 30 minutes off and then back on. The nurses had to leave me, and when I was shouting, because I couldn't breathe, nobody, until by chance at this point, until my chance came, and at this point my blood saturation levels went down from 98% to 60% as I could not breathe. The whole experience petrified me into going into hospital. Also, not having the right PAs also affected my mental health, as previously I employed PAs that were not empathetic and negatively impacted my mental health. Due to having no assistance of being an employer, I was unprepared on how to deal with such behaviour that I was experiencing. Behaviour varied from being shouted at, headbutted, and a PA bringing his girlfriend and daughter to work. One PA was doing a disturbed sleeping night, and I woke him because I needed my position altering. He came in and shouted, "What the do you want?" Now this made me feel anxious because we were alone with him. The same PA was getting irate, putting my sling on. I politely asked if he could calm down because I felt uncomfortable. He replied, "I could just walk out now. I have less jobs for less than this." My PA team is now excellent. I have had more experience in finding the right type of staff and stringent training. The care package I received has also affected my mental health because as social services somehow expected my family to do a certain amount of my care for nothing. After years of fighting against this, it has thankfully been lowered from them doing all of mine and my brother's care, as I now have a full PA team. This at the time really affected my family relationships and obviously exacerbated my depression. It wasn't fair, the pressures they put on my family, as they have enough to do in their own lives. We could never spend family time without them having to do our personal care, which made them feel like it was a job. I had my continuing healthcare assessment to decide if I required full funding for my care because of my health needs, with no prior explanation of what the meeting was. They didn't explain what the meeting was for. So when they came, they didn't have enough evidence and had to return for a second meeting. On the second meeting, the same thing happened, so they had to come for a third time. On the third time, I was awarded the full funding 18 months after the decision was supposed to have been made. The whole question process involved in the assessment was taxing mentally. There was not enough support for me to answer the questions. I think it's the next, yeah. Also, holidays affected my mental health because it's difficult to arrange holidays and they are vital to improving everybody's well-being. Having the right PA team is essential. Although this might embarrass my PA who is with me today, she is one of the most selfless people you will meet. We are so lucky that we have employed her. Our other PAs at the moment now are also amazing. I went to Bruges, it was amazing. Even greater because of the range of beer, which I love. Weekends away are great for everybody, and everybody needs these. And then going to the next slide. Activities that help my mental health. Going out, because I find staying active and following your hobbies is very good for improving your own well-being. Socialising in the pub, even if it's just random regulars that attend the pub, just talking to other people, is good. It enhances abilities such as self-confidence, for example. It's very good just to get out and about. Education also. Don't let your aspirations go out the window. You might need extra help, but you can achieve your full potential. It's healthy to learn and debate about issues learned in the classroom. I'm heavily involved with the Labour Party. I have been elected Disability Officer of Crewe and Antwich for 2 years now. I am also elected as North West Young Labour Disability Officer. I've been a Labour Party member for 7 years. Working for the good of others is beneficial to your own well-being because you are helping people, so it is very rewarding. Family. Spending time with your family is really nice. It helps relax and calm yourself. Family is everything. They helped me get to where I am today. Without the support, I'm not sure where I would be. My sisters are also amazing in caring for me. There has been occasions when I was in hospital, when my sister had been looking after me throughout the night, and then going to school the very next day. Charity work. This has also helped improve my mental health. I'm a trustee of DMD Pathfinders. It is really rewarding. Like, look at today, I am hopefully giving you ways to cope with your own mental health. The opportunity to speak is very beneficial, and I am very grateful to have been asked to do so. It is a worry doing presentations, for example, but getting out of your comfort zone definitely helps your mental health. This is probably the first presentation I have done. Supporting other families with Duchenne, that is very good for improving your own well-being, because it shows them what's possible and radiates off hope. This next slide are pictures that are examples of the previous points. So number one is me helping another family, local family with Duchenne. I met his parents and the boy named Lincoln. This was a very rewarding experience. Number two is politics. This is the Blackpool conference last weekend, where I had the privilege to meet Jeremy Corbyn. And then number three is family. This was a family trip out to the Blue Planet Aquarium. Then number four is that same trip in Blue Planet Aquarium with two of my amazing PAs. There goes the slide. Talking about mental health is okay. Mental health affects everybody. You should not be ashamed to talk about it. If you break your arm, you see a doctor. Physical and mental health deserve to be treated equally. Duchenne does suck, so you will have low points. Talking to others in the same situation will definitely help. So once again, do not be ashamed to talk about mental health problems. Where mental health provision has benefited me. Talking to somebody independent is extremely beneficial. There's no preconceived judgments. You are free to express how you feel. Talking away from your family takes the extra pressure off you both. Counsellors are professionals, and they will have tips to help. People's perceptions of depression are that you are constantly sad and unable to cope with day-to-day life. This is simply untrue. Look at me today, talking in front of you all. Tips I have learned from mental health services. To just try and relax and let things go where you can. Staying active mentally is very important. For example, going out. Activities you enjoy or trying something out of your comfort zone will improve your confidence and skills you need in life. Having a good sleep routine is essential. However, I do understand this is difficult with Duchenne. Food and nutrition also play an impact on mental health, so make sure you're eating and drinking healthily. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. That was a really excellent presentation, and I'm really pleased you've turned your life around it.
All right. I think I'm just going to use this microphone if that's okay. I tend to talk loud and too much, so usually it's not a problem. But let me know if you can't hear me or anything. The presentation I'm going to give today is primarily focused, it's primarily directed to the people who have Duchenne. I mean, we have a lot of other people in here, and that's fine, but I just want you to know this is primarily directed to the people who have Duchenne. And I'm really happy, well, that sounds wrong, but I'm glad that I was invited to be a part of this, because this is actually a very important topic that's also of special interest to the Adult Guidance Committee that helps out with PPMD. This has been something for the past 2 years that we've had as a part of our conference, because it's such an important thing, and I think is often overlooked, or people don't appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to Mark and Ryan for coming up here and sharing, because I know that takes a lot of guts. So, well done. My presentation is going to be a little bit more technical, a little bit more clinical. This is from a doctor's perspective. The reason I wanted to go over anxiety and depression and talk about what it looks like is because oftentimes we see where people have it, but they don't know they have it, or they have features of it, but it's not kind of what they think it would be like. And so it goes unnoticed or unaddressed. And oftentimes, too, we find that in clinics, doctors may not always remember or think to ask about mental health type stuff, or to ask the right kinds of questions to kind of see what's going on. But I also wanted to cover, too, from my perspective, what are some things you can do about it? Because there's definitely things that are out there that can help. And I think sometimes, unlike the physical aspects of the disease where we feel more limited, with the mental health side of stuff, we have a lot of things out there that can really help and can really work. So I wanted to kind of give a quick overview of that. And I'll try to go quick, because I know that we've got a lot going on here. One thing I wanted to mention, though, is that everybody gets sad, everybody gets stressed, everybody gets worried. It happens, that's normal. In fact, when it doesn't happen, we kind of get worried about those people sometimes. But it happens to everybody, but it should be temporary. It should be not most of the time, it should be of a brief duration, and it shouldn't happen so much that it gets in the way of life, that it keeps you from doing things and causes you to disengage, or to really, or to the point where it affects things like relationships and friendships and that sort of thing. You all may be kind of familiar with this, and I may be preaching to the choir, but just to real quick go over, anxiety isn't always necessarily worrying about things, but it can be feeling uncomfortable, it can be feeling stressed, it can sometimes come from the perspective of something bad is going to happen, but I don't know exactly what it is that might happen. It also can be related to things didn't turn out like I expect, and I feel uncomfortable. I didn't anticipate this, and I'm thrown off. What can also happen is that it's hard to get it out of your mind. Like, it keeps happening, keeps popping into your head. It can be hard to think about anything else. You might temporarily be able to distract yourself, but it keeps coming back. There's different kind of aspects of anxiety, too. Some of the symptoms are physical, so tense muscles, stomach aches. Some people can get ulcers, headaches, that sort of thing. So it can be physical and it can be mental as well, as far as kind of the thoughts that you have. One thing that I tell people is, you may not realize that you're anxiety prone, or you may not realize that you're stressed, but if other people are telling you to chill out and calm down, that might be a signal that actually there's more of that going on than what you're aware of. So I just throw that out there. Also, comparing yourself to others. If other people don't seem to be as worked up or as stressed out or as overwhelmed in a situation as you are, that can also sometimes be a sign that you might have some anxiety that's going on that you are not aware of. There's different kinds of anxiety. One kind is generalized anxiety. This is somebody who kind of stresses about lots of stuff, and it may change from day to day about what causes the stress. It might be stressing about what's going to happen later in the day, or it might be stressing about something they've done, but they're worried about it even though it's in the past. They may also be too hard on themselves. If they make a mistake, they kind of blow it out of proportion, and it's the end of the world, even though it was maybe relatively minor. There can also be a tendency sometimes for people who have this kind of anxiety to be more rigid in their expectations. And so when they get their mind set on something, and when things don't turn out the way they expect, they get stuck. They have a hard time kind of navigating past that. And the more kind of rigid you are in your thought process, the more you're going to be in situations that trigger that anxiety. And so we see that there's kind of a connection between those two things. We also oftentimes see social anxiety in Duchenne. And I think this is something that has been largely unacknowledged or unrecognized. And certainly having physical limitations can make it hard to establish friendships and to interact with people as easily as you would like to. But we also see sometimes where some people are super shy. And I don't mean just shy, I mean like super shy. To the point where you say hi to them, and you may even know them, but you say hi to them and they may kind of look away and be like, oh. Or they may not even respond. Sometimes they may go out of their way to avoid having to greet somebody, but they feel really nervous about people. And they may be kind of overly focused on what they're doing because they're concerned that they're going to do something that might embarrass themselves or that people will think is weird. But actually, inadvertently, they end up acting kind of weird in those situations because they're so anxious, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where they're afraid they're going to do something, that's awkward. And so because of that, they do something awkward, and then people respond to that, and it reinforces their whole belief that there's something about them that is embarrassing. I also see more recently, probably in the past 3 or 4 years, where people are becoming more and more inclined to use electronic devices as a way to avoid social interactions. So they may go into a room where there's people, and they may feel stressed about that they have to speak to somebody, and so they'll get their phone out and they'll start, using their phone purposefully so that people won't approach them and won't say hi, or so that they won't have to say hi to other people and have a conversation that is stressful for them. So just something to look out for. Obsessive compulsive disorder is another kind of anxiety that we can see. And this is where people may have repetitive thoughts that pop into their head. And they may be, and they tend to be the same thing over and over again. So it's different than general anxiety, where it tends to vary from day to day. But it may be these irrational fears that keep popping into their head, that grandma's going to die, or that they're going to get sick, or something like that, over and over and over again. Sometimes the scary images keep popping into their head. And it's not like me, if I watch Stranger Things, sometimes I can't get that out of my head, and like that monster and stuff. It's not like that. This is like very scary images, or even lewd and crude images of a sexual nature or something like that, in a way that's not pleasant, popping into your head. Also, they may feel the need that they have to do things in a very particular way because it doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel balanced, or it doesn't feel right. And so they may do things over and over again. Something that we can see is like during schoolwork, they'll erase and rewrite it, and erase and rewrite it, and erase and rewrite it, and it looks fine, but it didn't look just right. Or they may have to have like the blankets on their bed completely smooth and everything kind of pulled right to the same level, or they may have to have the same routine every night for bedtime. And if you vary from that routine a little bit, it doesn't feel right, we got to start over again. One thing that I didn't mention, and I'm glad that Ryan mentioned this, but I forgot to put this in my presentation. You can also have what we would call phobic reactions that develop, which are fears based on very specific situations or settings. The hospital actually is a common one that we run across. Needle phobias are also a big one that we run across, where you have so many needle sticks that the anxiety associated with that can become overwhelming. Now, I'm going to move on to depression real quick. It's important for me to say that, again, feeling sad sometimes is normal. Feeling down is normal. Feeling discouraged is normal, as long as it's not happening every day, most of the day, most of the time, and it's not getting in the way of things. It's also important to note that a lot of people who are depressed don't feel sad. That oftentimes is not a major component of depression. Now, it can be, but a lot of times people don't report feeling sad. What they do report is feeling nothing. They feel blah. It's kind of like they're stuck in the gray zone, where they don't feel happy, but they don't feel sad either, and they almost just kind of don't feel anything. One of the other main things that we can see when people are depressed is irritability, grouchy, less patient, more snippy. Now, if somebody's like that all the time, well, that may not necessarily be depression, but if you notice an increase in that, if things are getting worse, if it's becoming more pronounced, then that can certainly be a sign of depression. Also, drop in motivation for things that they used to think were fun. Now, I'm not saying necessarily not motivated for school, but it's more like fun activities, going out and doing things, spending time with friends, or other activities that they previously would have enjoyed. The interest for that just kind of goes down. And I just don't really feel like it today, or it's too much bother. Yeah, I don't know. There may be sometimes excuses that are used to help justify that. Like, oh yeah, last time I went, my friend kind of annoyed me, so I don't want to go today. Even though it's really reflecting kind of a greater drop in motivation. You can also see lots of negativity. Everything's bad. It's not the way I wanted it. It's not good enough. Being overly critical about things. Now, how often do anxiety and depression occur in DMD? Well, we don't know exactly. There's different estimates, but I would say certainly it can be quite a bit of people at some point in their life can feel some anxiety or depression. Sometimes it's related to a specific event that seems to trigger things, but sometimes there isn't anything that we can put our finger on, and it just kind of gradually develops or kind of gradually evolves. There's probably a lot of different factors that can contribute to it. If you have crazy parents and they drive you nuts, that doesn't help. But there's other things too. It's not just bad parenting or that sort of thing that tends to cause it. I mean, there's a lot of factors that can contribute to this. Medical factors, not getting enough sleep, having breathing problems while sleeping. Difficult situations dealing with the government and with services, and like the hours-long phone calls that you have to make, and you're calling one person, they transfer you to someone else, and then they transfer to someone else, and then back to the original person, they transfer you. All that can get to you. But also, I think, when you have Duchenne, when you're missing dystrophin in your brain, it probably increases the risk for developing some anxiety and depression. So in part, it's probably neurological. How much? I think we're still trying to figure that out. Somebody gave a presentation earlier today about research that's been looking at the impact on the brain. But I do think that for people, there is a neurological role, or there can be a neurological component to when these things happen. So what should you do? Don't ignore it. If you are feeling stressed, anxiety, down, unhappy, do something about it, and don't just pretend like everything's okay. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, because there's things we can do to not feel that way, but also we find that if those sorts of things are happening, they can kind of snowball, and they can kind of get worse. And it's always easier to catch something when it's a milder problem than it is when it's a bigger problem. Now, there's always, if it's a big problem, we still want to address it, but I'm just saying, if you're noticing this, don't wait, but get some help for it. Also, kind of like Ryan was saying, like you have to keep putting yourself out there and doing things, getting involved. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the state of politics in America. I actually probably, if I got involved with the politics, it would make me more depressed. But get out there and do stuff and help others. Contribute your time and energy to making a difference, because honestly, that has a big impact on how you feel, because it's so rewarding. Also, seek professional help if you need to. This can feel really weird and it can feel really awkward. I know it can be hard to know how to get started with getting professional help. Counseling and medication are the two main things from a professional perspective that we recommend as far as helping with anxiety and depression. When it comes to counseling, there's two main approaches that we find tend to work best: cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical therapy. Now, both of these tend to be very directive. They also tend to be very focused on learning skills to catch yourself and kind of replace those negative thoughts with more accurate, more positive, more beneficial thoughts. There may be some supportive counseling as well, which is basically kind of being encouraging and talking about how things are going, but it should be also very much kind of like they're teaching you skills and you're practicing these new skills. So it's not necessarily like talking about your childhood and that sort of thing. It's more like, what's going on now, and let's address it. It can be hard to find a therapist who you click with. I think that personality, it makes a big difference. So sometimes you have to try a few different people until you feel like it's a good fit. Now, you don't want to pick somebody who doesn't challenge you, though. So you want to like them, you want to click with them and get along with them, but you also want them to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable because they're pushing you out of your rut, out of your kind of where you're stuck. But it shouldn't be like to the point where they're overwhelming you, or it's really adversarial, or they're arguing with you, or that sort of thing. When it comes to medication, in the U.S., we like to throw pills at everything, which to a fault. However, I think in the UK, sometimes people are too shy of medication when actually it could provide a lot of benefit. So there's probably a happy middle there somewhere. But when it comes to medication, remember, we're talking about, at least in part, a neurological issue. It's a brain functioning issue to a certain extent. And it can provide a lot of benefit to address the neurology of it while we're also working on the counseling side of it. So I always say to people, don't be too quick to be dismissive of medication, because it can certainly help. It doesn't have to be a forever sort of thing, okay? There's some other things too, I just threw it up here. We can kind of skip through that. It could be hard to find a mental health professional who is an expert on Duchenne. If you can find one, great, that's awesome, but you may not be able to. But it's good to at least have experience, to find someone who has experience with people who have chronic medical conditions or disabilities, and who's open and willing to learn about Duchenne, where they can be educated by you about what it means and what your experience is like. Different kinds of professionals include psychologists. In the US, we have what we call licensed professional counselors, or LPCs. These are people who don't have a doctorate degree, but they may have a master's degree in counseling. Also, some clinical social workers do this sort of thing, so I'm not sure exactly kind of what the same, Janet, maybe you can speak to that as far as what types of professionals are available, but did I cover it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it depends if you're in an educational establishment, like in school or college, sometimes there's counselors or mental counselling. Also, you can, I'm not sure about adult service actually, but young people up to the age of 18, is it, you can? Yes. The issue is that a lot of the families, they raise in the review, an educational review, that there are anxiety issues. They're referred through to CAMS, which is the local team. Then the local team say that they don't have experience of Duchenne, and then you're sent through to the neurology team, your specialists, but often they don't offer you anything because they don't have experience of the education system.
Right.
And so what's really missing is a holistic view, you know, to have a team.
Everything's kind of fragmented, and yeah. Okay, all right. Well, I'll leave that to you guys to fix then. Yeah.
And we've been extremely lucky, right, for many years that we've got a dedicated neuromuscular psychologist attached to the team. But that is, in my experience, actually rare, and in particular in adult services, they don't exist. And the whole shake-up of the psychology service has brought more problems with accessible members of the teams. There are some neuromuscular care advisors who've got the licensed professional counselors, as you've got in the States, but there are not that many. And I think it's one of the areas we really need to work on and need to develop. And I think, you know, I like your presentation very much, and Ryan, yours, thank you very much as well. It was really highlighting the issues, and it just has to come more into clinical practice that we address them. And I think that as part of the preparation and also guiding the professional system in a way, I've been thinking for a long time that maybe we should start something like, I don't know, classes, or, you know, where young boys affected by Duchenne's muscular dystrophy learn certain strategies, and families and the professionals to recognize, like you said, the symptoms which sometimes aren't all too obvious. So that in the same way we build a system about, you know, about lung health and cardiac health and things, you know, about mental health, and address it right from the start, rather than, like Ryan said, you know, you need to find your people.
But let me finish up just real quick here. Just to wrap up, frequently asked questions. Am I saying that you're crazy? Yes, I am saying that you're crazy, but we're all crazy, so don't forget that. We all have something wrong with us. It's just a matter of recognizing that and getting help for that, rather than like pretending it's not an issue. I have some people who tell me that, yes, I might have some problems, but it's my life and I can do what I want. And I say, that is so true, totally true, but you're not happy with how things are now, and we can make that different. So don't hesitate, don't wait. It takes a lot of courage to take that first step. It takes a lot of work to find somebody who's going to be a good fit, but it is definitely worth it when it pays off. And if you need to ask for someone to help you with that process of finding somebody, you've got a built-in support network right here of people who can help out with that process. So I would definitely encourage you to do that.
Thanks, Mark. My name is Benina DeMarco. I am a neuromuscular physiotherapist and I work in the west of Scotland. I work with children and adults with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and I've been in this job a very long time. So the young people that I have seen 30 years ago are now in the adult services. So I have followed and tracked a lot of these young men throughout the course of their condition. And when I was chatting to Mark during the summer when I was out visiting, we chatted a bit about anxiety and stress and what that means. And Mark said, you know, it'd be really good if you could maybe come up and tell people about things that you've heard in clinic. And I have to say a lot of that has been covered today. And I think as well, one of the reasons that as a physiotherapist you tend to hear a lot about anxiety and stress is because when I go and visit young men in their homes, I'm there for quite a while. So people have the opportunity and the chance to tell you about things that have been troubling. So you always start off with physiotherapy about postural management, about moving, about looking at their chest. And then as the appointment goes on, you start to kind of get to know a little bit about what's been happening since the last time you saw them. So these are just a few of the comments and things that I have heard. One of the things when people say to me, I feel a little bit stressed or anxious, that really kind of came to the forefront for me as a physiotherapist was it's good and bad experiences that cause anxiety. And that was a bit of a shocker because you always kind of think it's got to be the things that are very negative experiences. But anxiety, a lot of young people were telling me that I really want to go on holiday. I know that holiday is going to be really good for me, but the thought of getting my head around that, how am I going to make sure that the place that I go to is going to have all of the equipment that I need, because I need it not just a special hoist, but the sling in the hoist has to be absolutely right. And if I don't have all of the equipment that I have at home, then that can make the holiday a less enjoyable experience. So starting to feel concern about the build up to the holiday is part of that. And that was something I think that you always kind of imagine going on holiday is going to be a really good and exciting time. Again, sometimes a day trip, where are the toilets going to be? If I find a toilet with disabled access, am I still going to be able to get into that toilet? Will it have a changing table in the toilet? There's lots of different problems that can be associated with a day trip. I had one young man who was going out for the day. He phoned up to make sure he was meeting friends. He phoned up to make sure that the place that he was going had really good access. And when he got there, yes, there was access, but it was too narrow for his powered wheelchair. So when the company, the restaurant said, absolutely, you can get in here in a wheelchair, they hadn't taken account of the actual size and dimension of the powered wheelchair. He was not able, his friends were in the restaurant, he was not able to get in to join his friends in the restaurant. So his friends came out and said, we'll look for somewhere else. He felt that he was disrupting the whole of their afternoon, and he said, look, it's all right, I'm just going to go home. And that was really stressful, and then that puts you off going out again. So no matter sometimes how much advanced work you do, you can still come across a situation that you couldn't possibly have thought about. Shopping, getting in and out of shops and in and out through the narrow aisles can be difficult. So there's a lot of problems even just going somewhere new. And often if you find somewhere that works for you, again, it could be going to the same place. Another thing that one of our young men told me was the lack of spontaneity. He said that sometimes his friends would phone him up and say, are you free this afternoon? We could go out. And he's thinking, oh, right, okay, that sounds really good. But my mum's with me this afternoon. My carer isn't coming in till a certain time. And I have to be there for the changeover. I don't have time. I don't have time to perhaps get ready to go out because I have to take a lot of things with me. So the spontaneity part of it can be an issue, and that can be stressful for a lot of young men. Another area, again, that I found that really kind of surprised me was hospital appointments. Many of you are you're also used to, not many of you, but you're also used to going to hospital appointments. And I kind of thought the hospital appointment situation must be a situation where you would feel at ease, you would feel comfortable, you know the department you're going to, you know the lift, you know the waiting area, because you've been there many times. But no, parking. You can't know what parking is going to be like on the day that you decide to go. You might not be able to find somewhere close. It could be raining. You're going to get soaked going from the car park into the hospital. I've had situations where patients have actually phoned me from the car to say, you know, I'm supposed to be with you in 10 minutes, but I have been here for 20 minutes waiting on a parking space and I can't quite get there. So that's really problematic and that can cause stress. And I'm always saying, look, don't worry about it. Just get to me whenever you can. Please don't, you know, get stressed. The actual consultation itself can be stressful. And again, this was something that, you know, as healthcare professionals, when you come to see me or our respiratory consultant, there's always a fear that you might be told that you are maybe getting a bit worse, that your readings weren't as good as they were last time, or you know, that there's something that your joint's a bit tighter and you know that your hand is a little bit tighter, but when you come to see me, I'm saying, oh, that's a wee bit tighter, we might have to look at a different splint. And again, that can feel stressful because it's acknowledged the fact that you've already thought something was a bit tighter, and what does that mean? Does that mean there's going to be a loss of function? Are you going to see a bit more of a loss of independence? Or does it mean that you're going to go on and have to have further investigation? So these are all areas that people have told me that you know, can cause stress. Another kind of reason that people have told me they can feel stress and anxiety is that when you're an adult with neuromuscular disorder, often you have a lot of time to think. And that was one of the things that came across. You know, you're talking about keeping your brain active, keeping your activity, keeping yourself active with a lot of things to do, things to anticipate, things to look forward to. So if you've got a lot of time to think, you can start to ruminate, things go round in your head, and you can make things seem worse than perhaps they actually are. Also, previous experience. If you had been looking forward to something and you go, I had one young lady with limb-girdle muscular dystrophy who decided that she was going to go shopping on her own. Her mum dropped her off at the shops. She had been to these shops before, but she'd only been to the ground floor. When she was looking at the board, she thought, oh, homeware is upstairs. I'm going to have a wee look at that to see what sort of things I can look at for when I finally get my own flat and I can furnish my own flat. So she duly went along, got into the lift, and the lift broke down in between floors. And the reason the lift broke down was because she was in a powered wheelchair and the weight of the wheelchair exceeded the weight in the lift. She was in between floors. She couldn't use her mobile phone because she had no signal in the lift. She was panicking in the lift. She was stuck in that lift for a long time before anybody realised the lift wasn't working. And actually, the fire brigade had to be called to come and get her out that lift. She will now never go shopping on her own. And that was such a rare experience. I mean, I've never known anyone to be stuck in a lift, but it was a very single, narrow lift. But I had never, you know, come across that before. But because of that experience, she will now not go shopping by herself, even though we've said that, you know, really, you know, that was a one-off, that there's lots of ground floor areas, even if you've now got this fear of lifts, you know, there are ways around this. And sometimes it's not just your experience, it can be the experience of other people. So the likes of Facebook, if someone else has had a bad experience, you can then take that on and personalise that to you. Well, if it happened to Brian, it could happen to me. If it happened to Mark, it could happen to me. So, you know, again, that kind of escalation, that fear, is something, again, that a lot of people have told me that it can be difficult. So again, what makes it worse? Well, if you're feeling unwell, again, all the things that James has talked about, a lack of sleep, if you're achy or you've got aches or pains, your stress and anxiety can be worse if you've got fatigue. And what can we do? Well, I actually thought this was going to come on first, and that was why I was going to say, so what can we do? Here's the expert to tell us. So we've already heard there's lots of strategies out there. You know, there's CBT, there's counsellors. Can be sometimes difficult to actually, Stefan, you're very lucky. We always think in Glasgow, Stefan's so lucky to have psychology input into his clinic. We don't have that in Glasgow. I work between the children's clinics and the adult clinic, and we don't have that, but we do refer on. And I always think that really at the end of the day, either we need to upskill many of the healthcare professionals that you come into contact with, that we can perhaps give you some strategies and ideas, or we need to increase the service that we have in psychological services. I don't know what the answers to that are. I certainly don't think we have enough input, and we have enough psychologists around to help develop strategies with you guys on a one-to-one basis, because you're all so different, and what works for one of you might be different to what works for someone else. So I do feel that more time and effort really does need to be put into this area. So that's really all I have to say. Does anybody have anything else that they would add to that?
Thank you. Yeah, the session which is after the break is called Rising Above Duchenne, and it's all about a 12-month program which teaches adults living with Duchenne how to rise up above depression and also create relationships that are really of value to them, and create powerful relationships with their carers, etc., and then to create a life they love. It's also going to be available for parents and for siblings, and it's going to be funded 100%. So it'll be free to adults living with Duchenne. I'm going to talk about that after the break. So I think it's a great lead up to it.
That was great.
Sorry?
Hi, it's more a comment really rather than a question. My name's Rachel and I'm a trainee clinical psychologist. So I don't have a particular skill base yet in DMD, but I suppose I'm just thinking about this problem that is just so evident in terms of lack of psychology support, and it's, I mean, maybe this is stating something very obvious, but there's clearly a real lack of a research evidence base for the impact that psychology could provide, and I feel like to try and increase funding for jobs like that, there really needs to be some good research to show commissions, to show people that this is really important, this is going to make a difference. And I haven't got the answer necessarily about how you go about that, but that feels like a clear gap that if somehow that could be filled a bit, that could help.
Well, and in the previous version, but also in the updated version of the care recommendations that are being published in Lancet Neurology, in both versions, and we really try to emphasize it in the most current version, but a mental health person should be a part of the clinical care team, and we came right out and said that. Now, it's hard to say, well, you know, here's all the data that shows that it works, but in a similar sense, you could say that for any medical professional, really, as far as an individual having a direct impact. I mean, but we know psychological services work in a general sense. And so really, I mean, this is something that we've stipulated in the care recommendations that needs to be in place. And you know, I think putting pressure in different areas, even without research findings, I think can maybe sometimes make that happen. But it should be a part of the care team of any neuromuscular clinic, because it is such an important factor in Duchenne. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And so thank you.
Hi, I would just like to add and big up Ros Quinlivan at the Complex Neuromuscular Centre. She has 100 adults attending that clinic now, and they have a clinical psychologist attached.
Great.
So one place is getting it right.
That's great.
The plan is to roll out 15 more of them across the country.
Can I just make another comment? When I started in Liverpool about 13 years or so ago, there was in the surrounding areas, very little knowledge about physiotherapy and how to recognize people, first recognize Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, but then also know about the problems. And what you said, I think, is absolutely right, that we do need to upskill people. So nowadays, I get referral from physiotherapists and from school nurses who have learned about neuromuscular diseases, and that is in a period of 10 years' time. And I think what you said, Ryan, is absolutely right, that you speak out and you mention it, and people will recognize there is an issue, and then I'm confident that people will latch onto that. And I think despite the fact that we haven't got dedicated neuromuscular services, but actually if a problem is raising its head on the horizon, then I think all members of the teams, both in pediatrics and adults, we do want to help and to support that. And I'm sure that if we show that there's a need, which we of course here all know there's a need, and right from an early age onwards there's a need, but I think the more individuals like you voice this, the more we've got back up as professionals to develop the services. And I'm very confident this will happen in a short period of time, actually.
So I'm gonna have to wrap it up. But the next session, there's a lot more opportunity to actually kind of explore some of these issues and have a bit more of a discussion, isn't there? So yeah, hopefully you'll all join us for that session as well. Thank you.
Thank you.